I've seen the biggest problems when the ambition was almost too high and you want to solve too many things at once. Unless, of course, sometimes wholesale change is needed, but that's usually also very painful. Unless you're willing to incur a lot of pain, usually it's better to just go with a very high cadence of change. It must come, if it's small change with a slow cadence, of course, that's the worst outcome. But keep a high cadence and quick deliverables.
Thank you so much for joining on our Neverending Climb to a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement for companies running SAP. With me today, we have Jan. Jan, can you please tell folks a little bit about yourself?
So, great to see you again. My name's Jan Poetsch. I'm an energy executive here in Calgary. Spent almost all my career in commercial roles. That's mainly on the supply chain, but also commercial marketing side. Most recently, I was the executive VP for PetroChina Canada, looking after commercial, marketing, supply chain, and also IT, which made for some interesting experiences. Prior to that, I spent almost 14 years with Shell, started in the UK and London, the Netherlands, a few years in Russia, and then since 2010 here in Canada. Most of my background is commercial, L&D focused, joint venture focused, but also with a good dose of supply chain and lately also IT.
Awesome. And you love skiing, which is how we ended up meeting.
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
Indeed.
Awesome. So, Jan, when we were talking, you'd shared, back in the day, you had hands-on experience in green screen SAP way back when, punching in a purchase requisition. And then you fast forward, quite a few things are still true for you about what that's like for a company that's using SAP. Can you elaborate a little bit for listeners? What is it about using SAP that was tricky for you and the teams that you've led?
I think the biggest thing is that it's not an intuitive product. If I compare it to any online shop that uses a Shopify background or an Amazon or so, it's intuitive. No one needs a user manual for Amazon. For SAP, it's a bit different. But what also astonished me is just how little seems to have moved on, especially in the energy space here. My first interface with SAP was in 1998. Did an engineering internship back in Germany for this in a tool making company. So they're welding and grinding, etc., these plastic injection molding tools. And when you needed a new drill bit or so, you just go to this old 286 machine in a corner, green screen, and just punch in your purchase requisition, and would go via 14.4 kilobaud modem directly to a supplier after it was approved as a PO, and your parts would come. Here we're in 2023, and purchase orders get printed and signed, and then scanned, and then sent to the supplier. So what happened to a quarter of a century of innovation, I guess, is the big question there to me. But then it's just not an intuitive system. I think it's incredibly powerful. Being German originally, of course, being proud of Germany leading at least in one software category, that being SAP. So I think it's a tremendously powerful system, but is it used to its full potential? I personally don't think so. I think from the examples I've seen, a lot of companies, they pay for 100% of what this incredibly powerful tool can deliver, but they use only maybe 5%. And I see way too many workarounds around it. So great tool, would love to use it more, would love to use it more in my past roles as well. But usually it's just getting those basics right in there and getting that adoption of functionalities higher. I think that was the biggest obstacle I was seeing to a really good SAP utilization.
Yeah, 100%. I love the emphasis on potential, because you're saying exactly the same thing that I've heard from others and that I often see, is that there's organizations that need to make things simpler and they feel sometimes a little stuck, right? And so we need to find ways to unlock that potential. And you made some really big strides in unlocking potential in some of your recent past. Can you share a little bit about what you did and how you went about that and unlocking the potential for your supply chain team and some of the teams you were responsible for?
Yeah, I would say this comes back to like earlier, the getting the basics right part. So what do I mean by this? We just look at a requisition to pay process. So from the moment the business needs something, punches in a requisition, to the moment the vendor gets paid. What are usually the pain points? The pain points are getting your requisition, then purchase order finalized and approved with sometimes multiple approvers. And then finally, when an invoice comes, getting this approved so that the payment can be done. And why is it usually so complex? I think a large part of that is just that unwieldiness of the system. If an invoice comes in and the service entry isn't created yet in the system, then typically someone, a clerk, an accounts payable accountant, someone else will need to create a service entry based on the invoice. So the first time this happens is when the invoice comes, so the clock's already ticking for invoice due date. Then someone gets this invoice. If it's a drilling company, for example, and it's part of a drilling campaign, then all these invoices come at the same time. So you resource your team for an kind of average plus load throughout the year. But there's a big wave of invoices coming as your drilling campaign finishes. Then all these invoices need to go into the system. Now, the moment only the service entries are created, then someone reviews them. Now, the supporting document should be in SAP there, but if the interface isn't intuitive, then what does the approver do? They just see something, a service entry. They can't really find the attachments often or can't make sense of it. So then they call up the AP person who needs to dig out the invoice, who then sends via email something else. Then it's really approved via a bypass method. And then in the end, the person needs to go back into SAP and approve it. And because a few weeks have passed on, if a field person needs to approve it, it's the back-to-back who's now working on this. So the back-to-back might not have all the information. Sometimes it needs to wait again until the original person responds or is back in the field work case. So you lose more time. And by the time everything is approved, your vendor is complaining that the invoice is overdue. Everyone wants to pay on time. It's not like it's a financial issue or anything else. It's just the unwieldiness of the system. There are too many steps and there's too many, let's say, almost workarounds necessitated by the complexity. Where I really like your solution that you brought to the table here was that instead of having a workaround system or another slick system, you use the capabilities of SAP, but with a much more intuitive user interface. Let's put it this way. Roll to the party that's best able to do that. Service entry creation should really be done by the vendor, in my opinion. And from what I've seen, that works the best because the vendor knows when the job was done. And then the client's job is to review these service entries and seeing, does this match what we saw being done? And then you approve or reject the service entry. But you don't need a field ticket on paper that then someone else signs off. That gets scanned and then put into another file. That gets sent with the invoice and someone types in back all these written things. So you can remove a lot of work. The vendor does the service entry, but net, it's actually, what I've seen, it removes net work from the vendor. So not only do they get paid faster because the process goes faster, but also it's less work on a net basis simply because the duplicated steps fall away. And internally as well, the internal people who deal with this, they're much happier because they focus not so much on just punching a number, but doing the job they were actually hired to do, which is reviewing, is this accurate? Does it match with our budget? Does it match with the PO? Does it match with the workload forecast? And then finally, the biggest, one of the, well, these are all big steps, of course, but the one big thing it also does, it's front-end load process. If there is an issue with the PO, if the vendor says, hey, I've done X hours now on this drilling campaign, let me upload it, but hey, this doesn't work because it exceeds the number of hours that are on the PO. This can all get fixed before the invoice is even done. Because they can upload the service entries the day after the job was done in the field or even the evening of when it was done. You gain a few weeks, and so you gain time, get issues early on. And then when the invoice comes, ideally the service entry is already uploaded, it's already approved. You can do a three-way match and you pay. Everyone's happy. And I remember how we set out that vision initially. The initial rollout, like everything was just, we said, well, it's an out-of-the-box solution, which I still believe is the best. If you can go, unless a process creates competitive advantages for you, go standard as much as you can.
100%.
Still, we found a lot of stakeholders, of course, that had different views, but like we found lots of special circumstances that created some issues. But of course, much easier to start with an out-of-the-box solution than with something custom, which would have complexity would skyrocketed. But when we first started this, I remember everyone's wary because there's been in any company, any big company, I would say at least, there are always big change initiatives. Every time they promise something great, so everyone's a bit cautious initially on embracing it. And here, what I just thought, within a few weeks, we had actually the business asking, can we accelerate the rollout of this? Because finally, our vendors don't complain anymore about invoice payment, but actually they're back to what we should all be doing. We work to discuss what's happening in the field, how we can improve there. And the whole PO, PR, invoice payment part just happens in the background. So it's a great thing. The other point we were concerned initially was, well, we're making the vendors do more work. But actually it turns out the vendors also wanted a solution like this because for them it's also painful to arrange all of these paper invoices, to scan all these paper field tickets, then send all of this stuff here, and then even get a payment potentially late or the very last day, etc., with lots of questions. Much better to front-end load all this part so that people can focus on what's really important, what really defines their competitiveness.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I think that the idea of it just happens. And I remember one of the quotes that we got from one of the waves of onboarding for those suppliers. The quote was, I'm not super computer literate and I've had to use a lot of these, but this is so easy. I don't see how I could get it wrong. And of course, this word gets around to others, and then other vendors are asking to get on there too. And that's when you've overcome that adoption barrier, then you've really unlocked potential there, and you've really helped speed things up. So I think that's brilliant. I am so glad that our team was able to help you be successful. When you're imagining other leaders of supply chain groups or other leaders of IT groups, what advice would you have for them in how they can think about something like this, how they can approach it in a way that can help them be successful and overcome some of those barriers?
I would just say keep it really basic and keep the elephant one piece at a time and just see really what's your biggest bang for buck initially. I think nothing really fancy. I think virtually all of us, at times, we let us stray if we say something where we think, oh, this is the great big bang change or so, and it's really, very rare that we have something like it. So I would just look at your processes, look at where the biggest pain points are, ask all the key stakeholders and say, okay, what's the one big step I can do, which within 2-3 months can make a big difference. Then you take the next step. So rather than, I've seen the biggest problems when the ambition was almost too high and you want to solve too many things at once. Unless, of course, sometimes wholesale change is needed, but that's usually also very painful. Unless you're willing to incur a lot of pain, usually it's better to just go with a very high cadence of change. It must come, if it's small change with a slow cadence, of course, that's the worst outcome. But keep a high cadence and quick deliverables. The thing is, okay, we'll do something within the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. What do we do? Meetings at least once a week, progress reporting against that, clear dashboard, and then just fixing that. I think start with the business process in general and the business problem. One thing I saw a lot is that you have often solutions in search of a problem. Latest example, I think, is being AI, probably my favorite. I personally love ChatGPT, so I love using some tools like this. But to me, it's in 9 out of 10 cases, it's the wrong approach to say, hey, we've got great AI, where can we use it?
Yeah.
It should rather be, okay, where's our pain point? And if the pain point is our AP accountants are completely overloaded with the invoice load and have to do overtime, well, then fix that, because they can't do a good job if that's the standard. If the business says, hey, we can't even focus so much on what's happening in the field because we're just dealing with vendor queries about invoices and processing approvals, well, then that's your biggest point, and just see how we can chop that down. And really,
that's beautiful.
Yeah, get those basics right. And if it's basic, if it's not a whole broken process in one go, I would just chop away that way, do it high cadence, quick changes, and
bite-sized pieces. Everybody wants the big transformation, and stats are showing that 70% of those big transformations fail because it's trying to eat an elephant all at once. And if you're trying to eat an elephant in one bite, I've never known anyone that can really do that. They're at it for a while. When it comes right down to it, you're taking little bites anyway. And when you're rolling change out, those bite-sized pieces for people to digest, they land better. They're easier to consume.
I mean, it's still important, I think, to identify what is the elephant before you start eating it. I think one risk of this, I would say, small bites, high cadence approaches, it can lead to a pure bottom-up approach where everyone is busy, but you don't quite know what you're building, and you end up with massive fragmentation. So I think it's a bit of both. I think identifying what is your elephant first, and then does your bite actually, is it a bite of that elephant, or actually have you started eating a gazelle and it doesn't help you with your elephant here? So I would say top-down problem identification, and then really bottom-up, really aggressively attacking it, but then checking back regularly. If you do high cadence, like every week, every other week, delivering one small incremental improvement, check back at least every couple of months on, well, how are we on track for the big project? Or is it something where we all feel really good about eating these chunks, but we've lost track on the big picture? So, of course, it's all easier said than done, but that's the fun of why we're all in business, I guess.
That's why leadership is so important, is knowing where you're going and having that vision of the problem that we're solving, the things that we've got to overcome to get there, and then bringing folks along through that to help give that guidance. It's so easy for a few different teams to go start to squirrel away on something that takes them off track. But when you can bring them back on point and just make sure everyone's still aimed at the right problem, the right vision, going in the right direction, it makes a world of difference. Jan, thank you so very, very much. Any last thoughts that you want to leave us with?
One, I was just thinking, so one thing that actually helped us a lot in this particular rollout, but also on others, especially on IT improvements we had, is you have a lot of stakeholders in these usually. And everyone, of course, wants to solve particular issues. And there is no end in sight once you have a lot of stakeholders who look at it bottom up on all the things they want. And in IT in particular, I think it's risky that you end up with these gold-plated, over-spec products, and with a myriad of applications where in the end they're all perfect, but something else could have done 95% of it, and it's more than good enough. So one thing we did actually is on a lot of the improvements, we had the slogan that we'll make a lot of things better and nothing worse. But we also said we're not solving everything. So when people came in and said, well, how about multiple payee situation with foreign currency, for example, we said, okay, can we handle this as a step out of the process? Like, well, that's not ideal. Ideally, we want everything under the one process. Like, well, okay. But currently, we have that step out already. So if we ring fence this, we're not making anything worse, and we can proceed with something simple. Whereas if we hadn't done that, we would have had to re-engineer a whole part of the process and delayed the big improvement for 95% of the situation because of the 5% where we now need a step out. And I think that's one which I see a lot. And I wish I'd done that a lot more in the past myself. But I think just this simple slogan or simple approach of just saying, we're not trying to solve everything. Maybe we don't solve world hunger here, but we're solving a lot of issues on the way. And we're not making anything worse, at least. And so that's so helpful in a couple of the last projects. And I wish I had discovered that. A few years earlier myself.
The secret to unlocking potential: little bite-sized pieces, and don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. Jan, this is gold. I really appreciate you sharing this with everybody. Thank you so very much. I hope you have an amazing day, and wishing you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.